Hey everybody, David Costello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is David Worrell. He is the partner and CFO at Fuse Financial Partners. And in today's interview, as part of this special series, we're going to focus on what it's like, what David does to really keep a pulse and manage his team. It's a question that comes up a lot on the podcast. It's a question that comes up a lot in our community, is what everybody else is doing to manage their team. So this series is to help illuminate what we see firms doing. All that to say, David, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. Super to meet you finally. I've been a Jetpack follower for a couple of years now and love it and glad to be here.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And, for folks that are maybe not familiar with you or your firm, tell us a little bit about what your firm does, who it serves, and the current team size.
Sure. Yeah, we're in a really interesting niche. We started off calling ourselves fractional CFOs because we thought that was the cool, sexy thing to be a couple of years ago. But we realized as we met clients that they couldn't produce a set of financial statements for us to tell them smart strategic things to do. We were going in there as CFO to solve big problems. And when we'd say, well, show us the little detail, they couldn't do it. So we pivoted or backfilled a little bit. And we are now a complete outsourced finance department for that small and medium-sized business. We're not the typical CPAs. We don't do any tax or audit. We do have a couple of CPAs on staff, but primarily we are trying to create a set of books and management tools for our small business clients so that they can run the business day to day and grow it in the direction they want to grow without worrying about tax and audit and that kind of stuff. We set up good processes. We have great looking books, but in general, these books are going to look the way the CEO wants them to look, and they're not going to be 100% GAAP or 100% tax or 100% anything. They're going to be tailored to the CEO so that he can run the business more smoothly and productively.
Interesting. And so you don't do any of the tax or bookkeeping in-house. Do you have a set of contractors or firms that you recommend, or you say whatever existing structure you have will plug into?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't explain that very well. So we started off as just CFOs, but we have created a team of accountants and controllers and VP level finance guys who can do all of that stuff. So
Okay.
Our business is now about 50-50, 50% just pure transactional bookkeeping every month end close, weekly updates, and then it's still 50% kind of advisory CFO level. We drop into every account every month and give them a CFO one-to-one report, but also larger projects as needed.
Cool. Very cool. What's exciting about that, I'm sure this is played on your model, is folks that come in and just want transactional, you're already building the pipeline for some percentage of those to then graduate into advisory services.
Yeah, exactly right. And when we had only advisory services, we thought that was neat, but it was not sticky, right? You can make some big money in 1 month, and then the next month you starve to death because CFO advisory by nature, or part-time CFO advisory by nature, tends to be short-lived projects. So the accounting is what we call our sticky baseline recurring revenue model. And then we've got still a little bit lumpy, but more profitable project and consulting on top of the recurring model of accounting.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what's the current team size? We'll start there. What's the current team size?
Yeah, there's a dozen of us, 12 at the moment. We've been as high as 15, and I think we're shooting. If the COVID crisis hadn't hit a few months ago, I think we would be gunning for 20 people this year. We were voted the 29th fastest growing company in Charlotte.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think honestly, with your approach, I've been telling this to a lot of firms like the one you operate, is the fact that you have that level of a relationship with these firms, the fact that you go all in on helping them during COVID-19. I think, perhaps the growth targets are missed this year, but I just have a hunch next year or the year after, you're going to far surpass the growth targets, and there's going to be a interesting groundswell for people that are really leaning in and helping and doing the right things in 2020. It's going to pay off in big dividends over the next couple of years.
Quickly on that, at the end of the last recession, part-time outsourced help in all areas was the first thing that came back. And likewise, it's the last thing to be cut as we're going into a recession. So even as you're trying to downsize and save money and cut costs, you're cutting full-time people and you're bringing in part-time resources. So outsourced accounting in general, everybody's got to have accounting. It's part of the law. It's helpful. and it's not that expensive when you look at comparing it to, say, a full-time person. So I think the outsourced industry in general is going to continue to do well
Oh yeah.
in the months or years ahead.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here. Go out and start an accounting firm. Everybody
Yeah.
listening.
There you
Um,
go.
so those 12, and what's the organizational structure? How's it broken down?
We are pretty even, kind of 4 CFOs, 4 controllers, 4 accountants. Um, there's people with different specialties at each of those areas. We've done that very purposefully, hire a real broad variety of people with different backgrounds, from agriculture to manufacturing to, supply chain or software. But yeah, accountants who do the day-to-day transactional accounting, controllers who are CPA mostly, and they're looking at month-end and journal entries, and then CFOs who are there for client relationship building and big projects and banking relationships and investor relationships and those sort of things.
Got it. And what's the reporting structure look like amongst those 12?
Man, we try to be such a flat organization mentally and culturally. We try to be one big family and not have bosses and org charts. But we really struggled with how to manage somewhere around, I think the textbooks would tell you somewhere around 7 or 8 people. You start to go, wait a minute, this is too much for me to handle as the guy at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. I got people lined up out my door every day, and it's not working for me. So uh, about 10 people, we split the team into 2, and we now have 2 separate teams, and each team has a accountant, controller, and CFO on it, or multiples, of course, and they kind of self-manage themselves. So it looks a little bit like cell manufacturing. We throw a new account at a team rather than picking a single person. We say, okay, team, here's David's account. He needs monthly books. He needs a KPI dashboard. He needs a new bank loan and some recapitalization. And they share it among the team so that those 5 people or 6 people, whatever it is, are always working together. And they get so efficient that way. And we went from this huge matrixed organization where people were always assigned to, each account is assigned 2 or 3 people, but those 2 or 3 people would be different on every account. And so it was this giant matrix, and nobody knew who to call for anything. And when we just took an axe to it, we just chopped it right in half, and we said, you're a 6-person team, and here's your 10 accounts. Go figure that out. Now it's so much easier to manage and communicate about each account.
Okay. And I want to dig into how those pods function. And do they is there an actual line that then reports up to you and your partner, or?
Yeah, I do have a partner, and we've decided that we will be in on on the weekly team meeting. So we've asked each team to get together at least once a week as a team, and both of the partners take part in those meetings, really just to listen and to be a resource. We consider ourselves the kind of the backstop, the last resort for customer communications and customer advocacy. And we're here to solve the team's problems, right? We're here to give them tools and techniques to overcome challenges and obstacles. So yeah, we keep our thumb on the pulse of the business by going to each of the team meetings.
Okay. A quick question. I think you said, and I don't know if I heard it correctly. What was the manufacturing? You said it's kind of like something manufacturing?
Yeah, cell manufacturing. So you know what an assembly line is, right?
Mm-hmm.
On an assembly line, each person does one little tiny job and they do it really well, and then they just pass it on. So we looked at that. We said, could we have a bookkeeping department who does all the transactions, and then at the end of the month, they pass it on to a controller department, and somebody, random controller person, would double check the books, and then they'd pass it on to the CFO department. That would be kind of like a line manufacturing or assembly line. And that just didn't work for us at all. So the other concept is called cell manufacturing, CELL, like a cell phone. And it's where, yeah, pods, exactly as you described it, where you've got the same team and they work the product from beginning to end. So if you're building a car, the pod starts off with raw material and ends up with a finished car
Right.
versus the assembly line, which passes it along to other people.
Okay. And it's really interesting, by the way. I think when you go into uh, you know, data set's small, so full disclosure with this, but as
Yeah.
we're going through these interviews, one, that 8, 10 person inflection point is very, very common. Even, Jetpack Workflow, we felt it. I remember we hired 2 people. They started the same day. We had 10 employees. And the next 30 days, it was like net 30 days after the honeymoon phase, I was like, goodness gracious, this feels much harder to run for some reason. Like
Yeah,
we had the percentage increase in headcount created a 10x percentage in confusion of communication. I was like,
that's right. Yeah,
what
it's
happened?
exponential.
Yeah. The but when it's interesting, this has come up as a bit of a pattern that for firms that do CFO as well as the compliance work, they operate in pods. It's really
Yeah.
interesting that this has seemed to solidify itself as a best practice.
Hmm.
Um, Now you've mentioned these weekly team meetings, so I'd love to dissect those a little bit. So you said they're per team, so one's 6 people are on one, 6 people are on another.
Right.
Um, when do they have these meetings? How long do they typically go for, and what's discussed during these meetings?
Yeah. We're getting pretty good at them, so they're about an hour. And wh- I, I like structure. I'm a member of a group called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and the EO meetings are famously warm and fuzzy, right? There's a lot of this relationship building and trying to really suss out how you're feeling about things and what emotional roadblocks are getting in your way from helping you do your best work. And so I try to start things off with some warm and fuzzies and let people vent and let the issues bubble to the top. But the heart of the matter is really it's just here's our list of clients. We've got 12 customers as a team. Let's go down them one at a time, kind of report out what's the current status and situation. Are there any hurdles or roadblocks? Anybody need help with something? And what can we do to make that customer happier, right? And so we just talk through each client. Each client gets sometimes a couple of minutes, sometimes 10 or 20 minutes if that's what's needed to solve the current problem. And during that time, all of this collaboration happens, right? Like people volunteer to say, oh, I know exactly the problem you're having with that guy's books. I'll get you this XYZ spreadsheet, or I'll look over your shoulder tomorrow and we can do this together. So I expected them to be reporting only meetings, like, okay, the boss is here. We got to check the box and tell them we've been doing really good work. But in fact, what turns out is that they are working meetings, and somebody will throw a problem on the table, and the team really grabs it and tears it up and comes up with a solution. And so I think we probably get more done in that half an hour uh, than maybe the rest of the week combined. I don't know.
Yeah, and that happens every Monday.
Once a week, the teams have their own days. Actually, I think both of them have chosen Wednesdays at this point.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so the team, and I think it's important that the team size you have, it's like 6 people. I can't,
Yeah.
yeah, I imagine there has to be some breaking point. If there's 8 or 10 or 12 people in this meeting, all of a sudden it becomes too unyieldy. It's not relevant for everybody. It starts to
Right.
break.
Yeah, you'd need a third team at that point. So.
Yeah. So the first section of the meeting is warm and fuzzies. Can you give me an example of what that means? Like, do you ask questions like, what's your favorite cereal or something? Or like, what made you laugh recently? Like, how warm and how fuzzy are we talking about?
So I have a couple of strategies. Maybe some of listeners or you, maybe you know what EOS is. It's an entrepreneur operating system based on a book called Traction. Anyway, EOS meetings always open with um, good news. Just pick one good news. What fun, great, wonderful thing happened to you since we got together last? My entrepreneur organization meetings, they always start with one word to describe how you're feeling today. you know, I like to start with success stories. Tell me about a customer that you really helped out this week. Or conversely, sometimes I start with failure stories. I used to really embrace that whole Google ethos of fail fast, right, and fail publicly, so we can all learn from your mistakes and that sort of thing. So I sometimes will open a meeting and say, "Hey, I got to tell you how I screwed up this week, man. I really stepped in it on Friday. I met with this customer, and by the end of the call, he was angry and I was angry, and things were being broken and thrown." So sometimes we start with a failure, sometimes we start with a success, sometimes we just start with an emotion or a feeling or a family. What'd you do this weekend? It's just good human relationship stuff.
Awesome. And we'll link up Traction and EOS in the show notes as well. And that's what do you say, 10 minutes? How long does good news last? 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's pretty quick. I mean, we're accountants, right? So we don't want to share anything like our feelings or anything. We just want to get back to work adding up the numbers, man. Don't bother me with all that warm and fuzzy stuff.
Hey,
I do have to,
you should talk with software people and engineers. It's not
same
too
thing,
different.
right?
But yeah,
Yeah, same thing. So is that left brain or right brain? I get it all confused. But you get the analytical people; they're not big on the warm and fuzzies. So sometimes I have to pull it out of them, and I never make them suffer through it for more than 5 or 10 minutes.
that's fair. That's fair. So 5 or 10 minutes in the good news, then you go in and the team gives an update. You know, each team has called a dozen clients or so, like you mentioned, and they say something like, "What this client has XYZ this week, no blockers, they love us." Next, and you kind of go through some.
Yes, exactly right. That yeah, we had a really good meeting. They love us. Everything's on track. Fine. Next, the next one comes up and it's like, geez, they just got a letter that says they're going to be audited, and we got to get all this stuff together. And their CFO quit, or their COO quit, and they've got to recruit people. Who do we know that we can refer them to? So it's a big resource fest at that point. Who knows somebody who knows somebody, or who knows how to fix this, or what resources can we pull from the whole company to help this customer out?
Got it. And you run through that. By the way, did you have to institute anything to ID blockers, or is essentially people they're so close to the subject matter, they're so close to the client files, they kind of know.
Yeah.
They're like, it's supposed to be done Friday, it's Monday or Wednesday, it's still not done. That's a blocker. Did you ever have any issues with that?
Um, Gosh, that's good. I I don't know how they keep track of it themselves. Honestly, we do use Jetpack, and I think that that's probably where most of their workflow lives. Yeah, but I trust that all of my folks are a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, degreed accountants, that sort of thing. So they're pretty self-starting in that regard, and I don't know how they come up with it, but they report back, and part of the culture of being open and starting with a warm and fuzzy is that vulnerability and making it a safe place, right? That's the word these days. It's a safe space, to admit, hey, I'm having a problem with this client. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you make it a safe space, people are going to come up with that, and they know that their team is there to support them.
Yeah, and I think there's just like you said, if the self-starters are organized and they say they got it, right?
Right,
And if
right.
they say they got it and they don't have it, that's a much bigger problem of like,
Yeah,
did you not
yeah.
feel safe, or did we make the wrong hire, or whatever it may be. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, to
And
be extreme
sometimes
with it.
that has happened, man. I'll get a call from a customer that blindsides me, and the customer is not happy, and I'll have to go to the person and say, "Wait a minute, last week you told me this was fine." Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. How do you? I mean, let's kind of explore that topic area a little bit, right? So how do you
Okay.
approach conversations like that, right? Because everybody has team members that mess up. It's going to happen. We're all
Yeah,
humans.
yeah,
And so this is a great example, right? You're firm owner. These clients are
yeah.
your babies. You do anything for these clients. We're like, that's our most firm owners, right? And then all of a sudden you get one
Right.
that's called up and you're like, you've hurt my child. This client was supposed to take care of it. So how do you approach the conversation and team member? What do you ask them, or how do you approach it? How do you do that?
Well, I try to keep in mind that the traffic accident analogy, right? Every traffic accident, you can look at it from the west side of the street and say one thing, and you can look at it from the east side of the street and say something completely different happened. So every story's got two sides. So I try to call the team member personally, one-on-one, and ask them, so what's going on with this person or this account? I got a call from the guy, and he mentioned that this, that, and the other didn't happen. And 8 times out of 10, you get just as much animosity from my staff member as I was getting from the customer. It's a bad fit. It's bad chemistry. They got off on the wrong foot. They had a disagreement about something, or really, what it boils down to is they have poor communication. And sometimes I have to apologize to the customer and say, hey, you know what? We're accountants. We're not communication experts. I'm sorry. That's my job here, is to be the better communicator. Let's let the accountants do the accounting. And sometimes I have to teach the accountant, the staff member, how to patch things up and how to put things into perspective and not take it too seriously. And then once I've had that one-on-one conversation, I will almost always take it to the next team meeting and use it as a learning experience for everybody, because it is so valuable, and people need to know that they're accountable not just to me but to each other.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Um, to close the loop on the meeting, so part one, good news. Part two is client updates, where you can get into working sessions. Is that pretty much the end? That's the entire agenda, or is there any part three or four or anything like that?
We do a timekeeping thing, and this is something I want Jetpack to develop over the next 5 years. By the way, please.
Hey, I
Uh,
love where this is going, man. This is, when I get onto the podcast, I get to take off
yeah,
CEO hat and all product
yeah.
worries and concepts and yeah, let's have fun with it. Where do we
All
go?
right. Well, so the one thing we're struggling with is utilization rates. So, of those 5 team members, which one is working too hard and putting in 50 or 60 hours right next week? It's one thing to look back and say, God, you worked 50 hours last week, you must be busy. But I want to know next week, is Donna booked next week because Andrew's only booked for 25? And I need to be spreading it around. Or maybe everybody on the team is looking at being utilized for 50 hours next week, and I got to take one of those customers and put it into the other pod. So projecting utilization turns out to be not hard, but interesting, time consuming, complex sometimes. And so we'll take another 5 or 10 or 15 minutes sometimes to walk through projected hours and responsibilities and who's going to be on vacation and who needs a little extra work to do, and just trying to load balance.
Load
Yeah.
balance. I love that word. Load balance. And at 12, at 12 people, because what? So let me ask you this way: what percentage of your work is just, every month? Is it like set in stone, right? We know
Yeah.
20. Is it 50% of somebody's time, 80% of somebody's schedule is pretty set in stone?
Yeah, I'd say theoretically the work repeats itself at least on a monthly basis, right? Because you're doing more monthly close than say weekly stuff. But 60 to 80% of anyone's time ought to be known well in advance, because we shoot for that steady state. Nobody wants their accounting department to be fighting fires all the time, right?
Right.
You want to nail down their books until they're comfortable with it and things run smoothly and are predictable. And at that predictable level, I think that 60 to 80% of my staff's time is also then predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about utilization, you're is it is it you're thinking about it, it's like with that remaining, let's say it's 60% is known, with that remaining, and when we say utilization, just to clear it up and just make sure we're on the same page, we're talking about not you working 40 hours a week, you're working 32 or 35 of those 40. So when we say
Yeah,
60%
billable hours, right? What
billable hours.
percentage of your time is billable and or spoken for in some way?
Yeah. So in that remaining delta of 20 to 40%, what so there's client gets audited, IRS
Yeah,
notice,
yeah,
vacation. So these are the things that fluctuate from your
that's right.
your capacity, right?
Yeah, audits, PTO, sick time, just a heavy workload. One of our clients produces short films, and they never know from one week to the next whether they're going to be on set making a new film or they're going to be sitting at home waiting for the next contract to come in. So sometimes it's just lumpy, you know. That's the nature of some of the clients.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason we're doing this series, and that's all I'm going to say about that. It's not like hey, for fun, let's get into some management interviews. Although it is quite fun, I think, to get into these interviews. But I think these are
Yeah,
important metrics and questions, and so
yeah,
yeah, I appreciate you gave us a very generous timeline of 5 years. I'll follow up with you after the interview, and we could talk a little bit
all
more
right.
about it. But these interviews are not happening just for fun, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
right. All right.
this is a different
Excellent.
kind of interview because we're peeling back the curtains. So
Yeah.
for our podcast listeners, this is a bit of a new one. But to reel it back in, so we have these two pods. We have this weekly sync, weekly meeting. Happens every Wednesday. It's 1 hour. We have this. So it's part one's good news. Part two is client update. Part three is like projected utilization and,
Utilization and load balancing. Yeah.
load balancing. Any final components of that meeting?
Um, I don't think so. We often end with just making sure that we've communicated everything, not just to each other, but to the people who weren't in the meeting, right? Is there anything we need to say to the other team?
Mm.
Anything we need to pass up the line to if one of the partners wasn't there, or things we need to write down, and we capture this stuff. So um, yeah,
Do you,
anything we can capture and communicate.
do you assign that in advance or do you assign that at the end of the meeting? Like, is there an official, like, hey, David's not in the meeting, so somebody needs to follow up with them? Like, is there a note taker assigned, or is it kind of afterwards if somebody's missing?
Yeah, so we use Slack. You're familiar with Slack, I guess. Um,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So we have a Slack channel for each client, and one person on the team always takes notes into the Slack channel for that client. So as we're going down the list, Donna will say, "Hey, Chirp Films is just starting an audit, and they're going to need some extra help next week digging up stuff." And so we will write into the Slack channel for Chirp, meeting update, audit starting, and then we'll direct message. We'll say, at David Worrell, please jump in and help with this audit prep stuff, or at Steve Milan, we need somebody to go talk to the banker or something like that. So sometimes we'll make little assignments, but there's always that permanent record of everything that we've talked about in Slack, which is fun.
Very cool. Okay, that's awesome. So then after that, is that meeting officially kind of done at that point? Is
Yeah,
there any other?
yeah. We're all sick of each other after an hour.
Okay. And is there any other? So that seems like it's a main one. It's a foundational meeting. You have any other every week? Are there other consistent touch points that you have to monitor the team in any way, or is that the main one?
No other consistent touch points. Everything else is either technology or ad hoc meetings. I really do encourage people to jump on a Zoom call or a Slack call or walk into somebody's office. But you and I were talking earlier. We're accountants. That doesn't happen, right? The communication by people who are detail mindset and deep into their work doesn't happen as much as you'd like. Sometimes I make a concerted effort just to call and have one-on-one discussions. I told myself I was going to touch every member of my team once a week, one-on-one, have little talks. I haven't been very good at living up to that, but I think that would kind of be the ideal, and it would teach them the habit of communicating more regularly with everybody. So I encourage it, but really that once a week thing is often all we get.
Okay, got it. And you have a partner at the business. Do you have any standing meeting with your partner to touch base, or?
We do, yeah. We have a partner meeting every Friday morning,
Okay.
and he prefers to be on the phone, which I like because the phone is kind of a lost art, man. He's a little bit older, and I like the two-way communication nature of the phone. Right, when you're in person in a meeting, great, you can talk face to face. But if you got five people around, it's not really a conversation. And if you're using Slack or email or something like that, you're really communicating in one direction, and you tend to be hiding behind it and trying to be brief and concise and all this stuff. So, gosh, for the important strategic discussions that we have as partners, I sure like phone or in person, and going out to lunch when we used to be able to go out to lunch.
So you'd have it. This meeting would last the entire morning, and then you'd go out to lunch. Is that the typical?
I'd say we give each other maybe 2 hours a week, something like that. Just a concerted, focused strategy. Yeah. So.
And what? That's really interesting because I mean you're certainly working on the firm, right? With those
Mhm.
times. So is it? Do you have an agenda, or what kind of things do you talk about in those meetings?
Um, boy, big burning dumpster fires always get the first attention.
Yeah,
Whatever.
right.
You got to fight fires, I suppose. And then it's long-term growth initiatives. What can we do to better position the firm? Do we want to start some new initiative? Recently, we started something called DIY CFO. So we're going completely digital with all of our accounting knowledge and best practices and how to's and stuff. We're creating a YouTube channel and that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of discussions that we might have in a partner meeting. Uh, are we doing the right things? The tactical meetings, the team meetings are you doing things right? And the partner meetings are you doing the right things?
I love the distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you brought up EOS earlier. I mean, kind of the final question I have for you is, what resources do you turn to continue to sharpen your management cadence, your operational disciplines that you've talked about, your leadership? Have you found an author, a book, a series, a blog,
Mm,
whatever, as a good
mm,
resource?
that's interesting. No.
Very
So,
honest answer.
yeah, the honest answer is no. We tried EOS. It didn't work for us, which I know is kind of heresy. There's so many people that are just apostles of EOS, and it's a very popular and a very strong system. And I understand why it does work for some people. Didn't work for us primarily because I never felt like it did that second thing we talked about, which is helping us do the right thing. EOS was a really good operational model to do things right and get things done. But I was never sure that it was focusing us on long-term growth and doing the right
Hmm.
thing. Maybe I wasn't using the tool right. That's what all the expensive consultants tell me. Uh,
I will say to interject slightly
yeah,
on that. So EOS is something that we've tried to adopt at
yeah,
Jetpack, and the tools inside of it. So there's this one page, I mean, you know about it, maybe our listeners don't, called Vision Traction Organizer.
right.
And I will say it is a nice structure to try to put together short, midterm, long-term
Yeah,
strategies, but
yeah,
it doesn't, a lot of the heavy lifting is just thinking time,
yeah. It
right?
is.
Like
You're
it's
right.
not going to answer exactly, it's not going to answer the question, how you put it. Are we doing the right things? Are we making the
Yeah,
right moves? It
yeah,
won't really give you a way to develop your strategy
right.
in a good manner.
Right.
But and so we're still at our world of like trying to adopt certain tools of it. But I wanted
Yeah.
to say don't feel bad because we haven't adopted it fully. We
Yeah,
we will take certain things, we'll try them out, and then we'll run retros on them and say we didn't like it for this reason. We're going to change it to
yeah.
XYZ.
I do have one that I always fall back on. For the last 20 years, I've always fallen back on this tool called the one-page business plan. And it's a small, oh my gosh, I've got it on my desk right now. You can't believe it. It's a small paper workbook, maybe what is that, 8.5 by 11 or 10 by 12 workbook, uh, written by this guy named Jim Horan, who was out of California. Jim died recently, but one page plan it's funny in that it's kind of cartoonish looking. It's a very fill in the blank sort of
Oh,
workbook.
interesting.
Yeah, and if you go through even 20 or 30 of these pages, it does help you suss out those strategies. But then the whole purpose of it is to get to the simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Hmm.
So if you go through 30 pages of all this complexity, you've got all those issues in your head, and then you boil it down to one page, and the one page simply asks you 5 questions. What's your vision? So in other words, what are you building? What's your mission? Why are people going to buy it from you? What's your objectives? Meaning, how are you going to measure success? What will you look back on when this is built and say, yeah, we succeeded? Uh, Vision, mission, objectives, strategies. So how are you going to hit those objectives? And then finally, plans. And plans are what do you got to do right now to start executing on that strategy and hit those objectives so that your customers buy you for your mission statement and you achieve your vision. Okay. And man, when you sit down and just make it that simple, uh, I think it's amazing the amount of thinking you can do when you're not wrapped around the axle of worrying about, is this a rock or is it a drop down issue that we need to put on the 10-minute discussion list that happens in 15 minutes from now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, and I know, you know, personally when we were trying to you know, this is where, so for people listening, it's like, I mean, I feel good about our one pager we put together. I'm going to buy Jim's book because anytime you can get a better question about your business, I think it's worth figuring out what that question is, right? And
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing. It's like, what's the right question?
Well, that's the right question.
Answers will come. And I liked it. What I did like about EOS is that they said, well, what is your, let's just start here. Why do you exist? Why do you exist as a firm,
Yeah.
as a business? So, you know, we end up, so our little kind of like two-liner mission, vision, vision, mission, I don't know,
Yeah.
is we enable professionals to do their best work. And we
Yep.
do that by solving painful workflow problems.
Yeah.
So if we're
Yeah.
thinking about
Awesome.
where we're going to build stuff on our product,
Yeah.
okay, right? We're leaning into more kind of management challenges as
Yeah.
a whole. And
Yeah.
so management challenges could be how do you run performance reviews and how do you run one-on-ones? But it's like, well, it's important. Is it a workflow problem? Does it stop people from getting their work done on time?
Right.
If it's not, yes, then we're not going to do it, right? So it
Right.
has helped us out tremendously, but we're going to link up the book, the one-page business plan. And do you own the
One page.
copy that's for the creative entrepreneur?
Let's see. This one is there's about 10 different copies now. This one is for the busy executive, and but he does have one called for the creative entrepreneur, and also for the woman-owned business, and for the nonprofit, and they're all essentially the same. I mean, they walk through the exact same process, but he tweaks them, 20%, 30% to be focused on your niche.
I love it. We'll link that up in the show notes. Any final resources? Any final recommendations?
Mentoring, man. You just can't make it through life and be all you want to be if you don't identify some mentors and open up to them, be your authentic self, get some new viewpoints and fresh set of eyes on your problems, and learn from people who have been there before. And yeah, for me, that's what it's all about, really.
And if somebody's trying to figure that out for themselves, do you recommend a thing like EO, or how do you go out and find a good mentor?
EO is super. It puts you in a forum with 5 to 7 other people, and you kind of self-mentor each other, I guess, by sharing experiences. Um, there's there's various levels of EO. I won't go into that, but EO, I'm involved in a couple of mentoring programs that are connected to incubators, and just reaching out to people that you respect and admire and asking for help. It's so important in life to ask for help and put your ego aside, because the most successful people don't have an ego, right? The most successful people are open to paying it forward and helping the next person with a leg up. And God, I get calls all the time. I will talk to anybody, dude. I got I got no ego in this game. You want to talk to me? Let's talk. Let's talk. We're both going to learn something. And I think too often, my wife just shakes her head. I can't believe you called that person up. I mean, she's the publisher of Entrepreneur Magazine. Yeah, well, she's got 2 legs and puts her pants on just like I do. And it's amazing who you can reach out to. And once you, I'm not saying that every person is going to be your mentor. I'm saying that when you are authentic and vulnerable and ask for help, it's amazing how you can build relationships on that. And when those relationships build, and they will naturally become a mentoring situation for you if that's what you're looking for.
Awesome. I love it. Well, if somebody wants to reach out, say thank you for coming on, learn a little bit more about you, what is the best place for them to connect with you?
I'm on email every day, david@fusecfo.com. My YouTube channel is out there. That's the DIY, do it yourself, DIYCFO.com. And and I got a cell phone in my pocket all the time, 704-614-2701, man.
All right. Well, hey, I'll leave it up to you if you want to keep the phone number in for once we release it. That might be the first time we have somebody that gives out a phone number. Probably won't put that in the show notes, though. You got to listen to get the phone number. You can't just
That's right.
read the post. You
That's
really got to
right.
listen.
That's
Well,
right.
David, this has been a real treat. If you're listening to today's episode and you're out doing your gardening work, you're out trying to buy mulch, which, by the way, you can't buy mulch in Pittsburgh anymore. It's all gone.
Oh
I
no!
can't I
Oh my
can't find
gosh!
mulch anywhere. But maybe you are the lucky person listening and you found mulch and you're outside and you're landscaping, you're having fun with it, and we're in your AirPods and you're enjoying it, but you couldn't write down everything David mentioned today. You couldn't write down about the book, about some of the questions he asks, the cadences he uses. You can go to jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog. We'll do a full write-up of today's episode. We'll link everything up. We're going to link up his YouTube. We're going to link up those books. We're going to link up his website and LinkedIn at jetpackworkflow.com/blog. If you love the episode, please leave a review. And if you really loved it, share it with a fellow firm owner that needs to hear stuff like this. David, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, David. That was fun, and I hope everybody learned a little bit. I did. So there you go.